there, Internet, MegaMogwai here, and I got another video for you guys today. I say another video because it's not really the standard video you guys see on this channel. Today I'm joined by my buddy ImpetuousPanda. Hey, how's it going, man? Say hello. That's your cue?
It's good. It's great to be here. I hoped it would be for a progress day.
Oh, God, I knew you were going to do that, man.
But this is good enough, I'll take it.
Oh, my, a billion progress day comments incoming. Soon, TM, all right? I'm going to go with that. But yeah, I figured we would do this video because tomorrow is the seasonal tournament for the Empires of the Ascended. It is a very important event. It's divided by different regions, and Panda and I are going to be casting the European region tournament, which is going to be happening tomorrow at what time, Panda? I don't want to mess this up.
I think it's 12:30 noon, somewhere around there. Just tune in at noon. Go to the Twitch channel for the official Riot Twitch channel for Runeterra, and you'll find everything there. Or on Reddit, I'll probably make a thread with some info about it as well.
The link will be in the description down below regardless, so you guys can check it out. I wanted to upload this video today, the day before the tournament, so you guys, for anybody who wants to stop by and watch, you have the news, and for those of you who may forget about it, well, it's tomorrow, so you don't have to really wait that much for it. It's really exciting because we are going to see some of the very best players in the world, because I say the world because it's the European region, and we all know that's the best region when it comes to talent. Like, NA, Omega LOL, But yeah, no, jokes aside, we have a really strong lineup of players here. The European players have been really prevalent in competitive Runeterra for, ever since we started having tournaments. We've had some really, really strong names. And ever since the last seasonal event, we had a shift in what is the qualification process. Like before, it was a more variance-inducing sort of like Swiss face, right? Where if you lost, I believe if you lost more than one game, you were completely out of it, right, Panda?
Yeah, it was just 5 rounds, which made it, obviously, there was less time to prove you're one of the best players, and there's a lot more variance. Now, like you're mentioning, it's 9 rounds. So with a bigger sample size, there's a bigger chance to weed out the not-so-good players and to make sure that the best players in Europe qualify.
I think we can both agree that this time, that definitely worked because we have some of the most prevalent players making it through, and it really feels like this format. Well, it was definitely longer. Like I was checking on Twitter, people were playing all day because 9 rounds is a lot. We got, honestly, most of the best players are here. It really did work out in that sense. It kind of guaranteed that, the most consistent players would make it through. And it's very exciting because we have a lot to talk about regarding the qualified players. We have a list of favorites and contenders and dark horses that Panda here has brewed up. And we're also going to talk about the decks and the champions that were most represented. We're going to give you guys a bit of a rundown of a little bit of everything so you're well informed for the tournament, and hopefully you're hyped for us just as much as we are, as we will be commenting it all day on the Twitch channel. Again, in the description down below. So without further ado, we're going to start talking about the tournament itself. We're going to give you guys a big, a very simple rundown over it before we actually talk about the champions and the decks and all that. And then we'll move on to the players. So this tournament has a $20,000, plus prize pool, and it is one of the many seasonal tournaments that now, after we saw the news of the World Championship being announced, is going to be very important because it's a very important thing, not only for the winners and the finalists of this tournament, but also for performance in general, because you can get points towards the World Championship as well. So Panda, you do a better job at the technical aspects than me, so go ahead, buddy. All you.
I think the biggest thing to explain is that these seasonals are happening every 2 months. This is the 3rd one already in this let's say this cycle, the first year of Runeterra's esports scene. And I started off basically the 2021 calendar year as well. Biggest thing is that now open rounds are 9 rounds. The weekend before the seasonal, so last weekend, there's the qualification tournament, which is just an open rounds tournament with 9 round players to play through. You qualify either through ladder or the last chance gauntlet, and there's going to be I think it's 720 players for these tournaments. So huge tournaments, and only top 32 make it. So it is difficult. You have to go 7-2 or 8-1 or 9-0. 9-0 and 8-1, you're in for sure. 7-2 will depend on your ladder. That's actually the criteria for who makes it in and who doesn't. So some top ladder players that had 7-2 score, they're guaranteed a spot because they have a high ladder seeding. If you don't make it into the seasonal, you do still get some world qualification points depending on your score, which incentivizes players to finish through all their matches and makes it more competitive. So I think that was a great addition as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But the big thing now is obviously we have the top 32 and we have the actual final of the season happening tomorrow in EU, but also we're going to see a tournament in Southeast Asia I believe there's 2 Asian tournaments, then the European tournament, and then the Americas tournament to end it out. But it's basically 24 hours of nonstop Runeterra action going through the entire world, basically.
I mean, if you want to see the best players going at it, and not just me with my tier 3 decks, then tomorrow is going to be a very, very cool day for that, as you're just going to see some of the best players in the world give it their all, really. And I'm really excited to see what lineups come through, if we see some cool targeting strategies, or if we see a more just solidified meta like we saw in the open rounds. We're going to talk about the decks and the champions that were most represented in the European Open rounds. As you guys can see, no surprise, Nasus and Thresh were the most represented champions right there. 24 Nasus and 23 Thresh. I don't know how that works. Like there was one deck without Thresh or something. Probably.
Yeah, there was, when I looked at the open deck list and kind of organized the data for this graphic, there was one deck that was just a bit more aggro, so no Thresh. Nasus was kind of like a Shadow Isles aggro deck, just with Nasus as like a late game, out. Okay. But more like that super aggro Shadow Isles Shurima version.
We see Lysandra and Trundle right there, right behind Nasus and Thresh, the infamous Watcher combo, which is one of the most uninteractive combos in the game right now. And, competitive players love uninteractive plays. So being able to finish off games rather consistently with the Watcher and being able to potentially generate multiple copies of the Watcher through not only Spectromatron, but a card that a lot of people also forget that is just as nasty with it is Fading Memories. The deck is just really, really strong. It's able to really slow down the game and keep the health up thanks to the Shadow Owls components. It uses Freljord for most board wipes, while using Shadow Owls for health gain as they go into later rounds, and then they level up Lysandra, generate the Watcher, and use Spectromatron to get it out for free and obliterate the opponent's deck. That is a very prevalent deck that definitely pulled its weight in the qualifiers. And right behind that, we see Zoe, represented at 19, and then Lee Sin at 12. This is no surprise. Like, unlike Nasus and Thresh, who mostly tend to go together for the most part, Zoe is perhaps one of the most flexible champions, if not the most flexible champion in the game. Like, she can go with a bunch of different things, but Lee Sin is definitely the champion that she is combined with the most. How do you feel about Zoe Lee Sin in an environment with these two other Shadow Owls base Titans?
I think looking at this graphic and seeing, kind of those 6 bars of the most played champions, for a lot of players, this was their lineup. If they just brought the 3 best decks, they didn't really care about countering something. Like, all right, just slap in the 3 tier 1 decks. They all fit region-wise in my lineup with the way that the format works. So why not? Quick reminder, obviously, these are the decks for the top 32 players. So this is the meta of the 32 players that qualified. Let's say the best players in the open rounds. And each player brings 3 decks. And there's 32 players. So seeing this, we know that Nasus and Thresh was pretty much brought by 3/4 of the players in their lineups. And you can kind of go off of that to see how it all fits in. But I'm not surprised. I think these 3, the 6 champions we're seeing here are the 6, they could just be in the best lineup maybe in the tournament itself. Zoe, like you said, is very flexible. She is with almost all the Lee Sin decks. I think it was 2 Lee Sin decks without Zoe, 1 with Karma and 1 with just Mono Lee Sin. And Zoe in the other pairings is obviously going to be in the very famous right now with Demacia pairing with Aurelion Sol, sometimes with Jarvan, sometimes with Leona's, some different variants mixed in, of course. But those are the 2 main decks. Zoe forks into either Demacia, Targon Control, or Lee Sin.
Especially after the nerf of Aphelios, Zoe has pretty much become the face of Targon. And the reason is very simple. She's a 1-drop that gives you really good value and potentially gives you more and more value and can become a win condition on her own if unanswered. Like, she carries a tremendous amount of pressure, far more than any other 1-drop in the game, and thus, she's a part of a pretty good region. Targon, in case you don't know, is pretty good. It heals a lot, it generates a lot of values, it has a lot of cards that make other cards, which allow them to not run out of gas. And Zoe is a vital component of that right now, as we see other strategies represented. Now, what's interesting is that I feel like with a lineup like this, especially taking into account Zoe, Lee Sin, and Nasus Thresh, I do feel like Ashe, for example, is a very solid anti-meta option. The only thing really holding it back is the fear of running into aggro. But would you really expect aggro in a metagame environment where Nasus Thresh and Lysandra Trundle are at the top, I think those two decks are incredibly good against aggro due to the Shadow Owl's healing components they have. And Nasus doesn't even need that much healing, as they just are able to match up their pace with their early game as well. So I think this could be a good chance to see Ashe really shine. I mean, we have seen people bring Ashe and do pretty well. We see there 3 different decks were playing Ashe and LeBlanc. LeBlanc tends to be the support champion for the archetype, even though that varies. You could go with Sejuani or you could go with other. But LeBlanc tends to be the best. And yeah, I feel like that would be an interesting one. I don't know just how prevalent aggro in general will be here, though maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people will go all in with that strategy.
I think it's not so much the meta allowing aggro to be great, but just some players have a special preference for their aggro players. They're very consistent with aggro decks throughout any season. Someone like Shuki, for example, he's a discard aggro pro. We'll talk about him later in the qualified players list as a dark horse, but he's a player that if you're facing him on the bracket, you might just prepare for that round 1 being aggro because you know he's going to be an aggro player. Same with Thomas from Czechia. He's a player that I interviewed him. He told me he went 8-1 in the open rounds with an aggro lineup as well. Wow. So some of these players have just a preference for aggro, and regardless of it being the best thing in the meta or just in the middle, they might do very well with it because of their experience.
That's scary. Like that's one of the things that I believe holds a lot of players back from bringing something like Ashe, because Ashe is really, really solid against mid-range decks in general and has a legitimate way to counter, the good old atrocity combo with Nasus. But man, it's so vulnerable to decks like Draven Jinx Discard. And I'm not even talking about running into a top tier, like world-class aggro player, which I just don't think you ever win that matchup. Mm-hmm. So it is a risk that you got to take into account. This meta is, well, we do have, certified kings at the top and queens. We definitely, there's room for people to bring different things, and that diversity can be a little bit scary sometimes when it comes to preparing a lineup, because if you want to specifically target something, it could blow up in your face in that regard. So we'll see how that turns out. We see a one-off of Leona, Quinn, Teemo, Nocturne. A lot of these champions, it's like they're not memes at all. Like, they're actually very legit. Braum Vladimir is a deck that I don't know about you, but I'm so happy that it has become like actually competitive at this point. It is represented at tournaments, and some people believe it is a legit counter to some of these strategies. So time will tell. Tomorrow we'll see what players bring, but I kind of want to give you guys a bit of a rundown as to what you would expect tomorrow, as we're going to go ahead and move over to the players. Like, I want to use this video more than anything to give exposure to the players, talk about them, hype them up a little bit, because they do deserve that, as they've done so much in the competitive scene, especially like the favorites are the favorites for a reason. So we're going to start off with them, as here we have the list of the 32 qualified players for the Empires of the Ascendant seasonal tournament. And let's run down over the favorites. What are the favorites? Who are the favorites? They're people.
So the favorites, I'll just go off the 5 favorites. We can go into a bit more detail one by one. But the favorites for me, and I think you agree with this, and kind of the faces of this tournament in terms of consistency, in terms of past results, are Gamebreaker for me at number 1, Fresh Lobster. These 2 German powerhouse players, I think, are 1 and 2. Frey Bach, not very far off because of his just incredible ladder experience as well, although he's missing maybe some key tournament results as well. Elix, as someone that maybe on the opposite end has a lot of tournament experience and results, but maybe not as much ladder experience. And then Agigas, as someone that we know from content creation, from articles he writes, from his deck building, I think, as well, and his reads on the meta and the lineups, but also just as a very, very consistent community tournament player as well.
I have to say, consistency and win rate and ladder is definitely impressive, and it is something to measure players with. But ultimately, I'm a believer that tournament performance is the biggest credential, because players like Elix, I remember Elix was the number 1 player in the ladder for when they were qualifying for the European Masters, unless I'm incorrect about that. He was the captain of the French team who made it all the way to the finals of said tournament. But first of all, I'm going to point you guys like exactly who we're talking about in the graphics right there by the numbers, right? Let's talk about Gamebreaker first, who's number 4 right there, representing Germany. Gamebreaker is a player very well known from the Yu-Gi-Oh community, actually. He was... I'm not sure what his exact credentials are in Yu-Gi-Oh, but they were very impressive.
One of the most successful players of all time. I'm not sure how many,
There's a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players, so that's very impressive, right? And this man is no joke in Runeterra. He kind of honestly appeared out of nowhere at a certain point and started dominating the ladder with his own version of Heimerdinger with Tarkin. I remember like people didn't really consider that to be a meta deck back in the day. And he was the first one to start playing it without Flash of Brilliance, because he reached the conclusion very early on that Flash of Brilliance, while you may consider the card an auto-include with Heimerdinger, it's pretty bad in Piltover Target because of the cards that it generates you, right? A lot of times you get that 15 mana, Aurelion Soul signature spell that you can't really use, amongst other things. So he cut that out and he devised a much more consistent version of the deck and was able to climb to, I believe, was #1 status on the ranked ladder. When people were trying to qualify for the European Masters as well. So I think he ended up like #2 in the end or something, but he just, like I said, he popped out of nowhere, and I had no idea who the guy was, and it was very impressive. And ever since then, he's just been a powerhouse, man. He was really feared in the European Masters, and from that point onwards, I'm pretty sure you're more familiar with his recent tournament results, but he's always up there, man. He did play in the last seasonal. He made it to the qualifiers. I'm not sure how far up he made it in the seasonal.
I think the
top
the
8 or something.
The biggest thing to sum up his entire why he's the #1 favorite is, like you said, he's a deck builder. He's created meta decks and he's not just a player that net decks and then does good. He actually it's a skill set, to create a deck that really dominates the meta is a hard thing to do. Not many players have that in their arsenal, and he's a player that has that. He has the ladder experience. Like you said, he's been top 1 many times. When he really takes it seriously, he can be top 1 easily, I think. He has a tournament experience from EU Masters, and he's the only player, I believe, in Europe to qualify to all 3 seasonal top cuts. So every single seasonal this year, the top 32, he's the only player that's made it. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to not have him as your #1 favorite. He's delivered on all fronts, basically.
Yeah, he's incredibly consistent. That's without a doubt. And a player that I'm very knowledgeable about, and that is also the face of consistency and honestly supreme facial hair as well, is Fresh Lobster, another player from Germany, #22 on that list if you want to pinpoint him down. Fresh Lobster is, I remember Fresh Lobster back in the day when this washed up caster would compete as well. I played in this tournament. I honestly forgot the name of the tournament, but it was a very big tournament. It was comprised of master ranked players. There were a total of like 150 players or something like that. And I made like this. It was back in the day, like this was before Bilge Water came out. So it was back when Demacia Bannerman was the king of the meta, right? So I made this anti-Demacia Bannerman lineup that was really successful, and I was able to make it all the way to the semifinals of the tournament. I lost to Fresh Lobster, and I remember when I ran into him, I saw people in the Discord saying, yeah, Fresh Lobster is the best player in Legends of Runeterra. I hadn't heard of him before. But that kind of impacted me a little bit. It's like, wow, people think this guy's the best player. Like, I wonder why. I faced him. He was playing Demacia Bannerman, but he beat me anyways. And he went on to win the entire tournament. And from that point onwards, I've always kept an eye on him. He started streaming as well. He's more of a competitive focus streamer. And he's just incredibly consistent, man. Every time I see like results from a tournament, he's always up there, in the top 4, top 2, winner. Like, he's just always at it. It's very fascinating to watch him going through his thought process in games when he does live stream, as he takes his time, man. He goes over all different potential outcomes, and he's a master of sequencing and resource management in general. He's just a phenomenal player who understands Legends of Runeterra at its core, and I definitely considered him, in my opinion, I would put him as the favorite over Game Breaklore, but I'm not against, both of them being #1, #2. It doesn't matter which one really you put first, right? But I would personally put him first. I think he's an amazing player, and I'm very excited to see him, because he did not manage to qualify for the last seasonal because of the format. He barely missed out, and it's so nice to see him here because he most definitely deserves it, and I'm very excited to see Fresh Lobster in action.
Looking at just community tournaments, he's the player. There's been a few. I think Thiago Stott from Brazil, a data analyst, made a list of like a rating with all the players and the results for the entire history of Runeterra with community tournaments, and he's the #1 player in terms of tournament wins, tournament top cuts, tournament first places, etc. He is a top community tournament player, let's say. So I agree with you. I think he definitely has all the data to back him up. And like you said, I think it's a split between Gamebreaker and Lobster as 1 and 2.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about Pakrvac, who for those of you guys, I'm actually searching him myself, is number 25, representing Czechia. Yeah, you can talk about a little bit about him. There's a lot to say about Pakrvac. He's a veteran.
I think the most that maybe your viewers will remember him is being on Team Czechia during the EU Masters. A team that
Czechia!
Pakrvac as kind of the captain, the leader, a guy that really, I think we talked to him in some interviews. He did a lot of prep in terms of like creating matrices and matchup tables, and really he values the data and the analysis a lot, which I think is a huge thing to have. But he's also just maybe one of the best pure, ladder players in Runeterra, because every single master, every season that started, he's the first players to masters. I think out of the 4 or 5 past seasons, like in 3 of them, he was the number 1 player to reach masters.
And he always like takes another account from a different region, or I don't know if to say, and he just gets up there as well. So
it's really incredible what he's been able to do on ladder. Yeah. We'll see if it can translate to, and I think
he's proven it though. Like that for me in the European Masters, Pakrvac proved himself as a tournament player. His preparation, it's so like he's got a very unique style. And and this revolves deck building as well. He's not just this net decker who just plays really well. No, he's an innovator, and he brought the infamous Czechia Fearsome onto the European Masters, which at one point like many players deemed it to be like the best deck. Even though other decks surfaced later down the line, right? But he was the face of the Czechia team, and in a way is the reason why we have some other members of that team who are, a little bit down on the list, because they're a little bit overshadowed by Pakrvac in a way. Though this tournament could be a good chance for them to take the limelight a little bit. But Pakrvac he's been there since day one, man. And he's a force to be reckoned with. I definitely agree with where you put him here. I'm excited to see him.
And going into number 4, we have Elix. We talked about him briefly before, but like you mentioned, top ladder player with France taking him into the finals of the EU Masters. So also a very good tournament player alongside Flaxo in that team as well with Team France. But still, I mean, he's kind of, I think, a similar player to Gamebreaker in terms of the results in ladder and in tournaments. Yeah. But Gamebreaker has that little bit more consistency, that little bit more of a maybe creating new decks like the Heimer deck you mentioned. So I think he's beating him out a little bit, but very similar players in terms of, what they can do on a good day and just their knowledge of the game and their consistency on ladder and in tournaments, kind of both worlds.
Yeah, he definitely made a name for himself at the European Masters as well. He was a phenomenal Fiora Shen player back in the day. I don't know much about his deck building skills, but I do know that, the archetypes that he does enjoy playing, he excels at. And I definitely am excited for Elix to represent France in this tournament. In case you guys don't know, he's number 21 on the list, and he is a powerhouse for sure. I'm really excited to talk about A Gigas though. A Gigas is a player that perhaps has made a name for himself a little bit later than some of these, but he's been a prevalent name in Legends of Runeterra, not only as a competitor and as a ladder player, but also as a content creator as well. He writes numerous articles, and honestly, they are phenomenal. They are really worth a read. You can learn a lot from his perspective on the game, and it also shows how open-minded he is as well. He's not narrow in the sense that he just like sticks to meta decks. This is a man who experiments with all sorts of different concepts, and that makes me believe that he really truly does understand this game, like I said, to its core. And he has a phenomenal win rate in ladder as well, with like 63% or something like that, which is kind of ridiculous.
It's one of the highest out of all the players in his top 32. Yeah. And like you said, his articles, you can tell, they're made for a high competitive tier audience because they're just very in-depth and just very well written as well. And that gives him also, because he's so immersed in data and lineup data, etc., it gives him a very, like you said, an open view of the entire meta. He doesn't have any biases towards, certain decks he's very popular with. Although with Spooky Karma, he did have a very, very famous, I think, run playing it throughout many seasons. But I think one of the players that maybe doesn't have as many tournament wins, so he doesn't have his name isn't like the flashiest in the scene right now, like Lobster, for example. Yeah. But in this same community tournament list, he was 4th. Lobster was 1st and he was 4th, so he's still there for the history of Runeterra as one of the best community tournament players. Maybe more with top cuts, making the second day more than winning it, but still very consistent and has played out, throughout so many different metas. So I expect to see a very good lineup from him in this tournament.
Yeah, super excited. Really, really excited to cast some of his games because I feel like I've never had the chance to do so. So, looking forward to that. So that's the favorites, right? Those are like the 5 players that Panda and I, and honestly, most knowledgeable people like in the competitive community, like would say. Even though, like I said, this is just power rankings, right? Like ultimately, we could have very different results later down the line. But I really do expect at least some of these names to make it far. Honestly, like I would definitely bet on it. Regardless, let's talk about the contenders. You know, we have another list of 5 players here with the contenders. We're gonna start off with Elix's teammate Flaxow. You know, we spoke a lot about Elix and Aoi in the European Masters, but Flaxow got a little bit overshadowed in a way, which it feels kind of bad because I'm pretty sure he deserves better. And yeah, he's here. He's here, and he's ready to make a name for himself as a contender here. In case you don't know, Flaxow is number... Where are you, Flaxow?
He's in the top 20.
PCS 27. There's number 27, representing France as well. Like I mentioned, I didn't know A Gigas was from France. Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, Flaxow was a member of the European Masters French team, which means he qualified during that event around November or October. I don't remember exactly when. He was in the top 3 of the French players in the ladder. And ever since then, I've seen his name pop around every now and then in tournaments, but I don't really know the most about this guy. So hopefully you can break up a little bit of information on him for me and for the audience.
He's always been a consistent ladder player. He's gotten a lot of, probably number 1s at some point, and has always been drifting around the top 20 like most of these, very, very good ladder players. He's missing those dominant tournament wins where he wins a tournament and kind of that puts his name really in the spotlight, which is why he's a contender, not a favorite. But he did also get to the finals of the EU Masters with Elix, of course, with Team France. It was a team-based tournament. Yes. And overall, I think he's missing that little bit of, winning a tournament and really cementing himself as one of the big powerhouses. But he's in... France is one of the biggest countries for Runeterra in Europe right now, and he's one of the best French players, so he has to be around, this top 10, at least in this contender spot for this tournament as well, because he's currently also like top 20 on ladder, both for the snapshot, for the open rounds, for the seeding, and still right now. So, I mean, he's definitely been putting in the work this month or this season even, and hopefully we'll see if that translates to success in this tournament.
And then we have a member of the prominent Church of Godwai. We have Bajatak right here, who is... like I mentioned prior, one of the members of the infamous Czechia team, who got a little bit overshadowed by Pakrvac. Like Pakrvac gets all the attention from Czechia, but Bajatak is a player that ever since the European Masters has made a name for himself more and more. A very young player from Czechia who is just getting better and better, in my opinion. Like the more time passes, the more I see his name pop up in tournament results. He does really well on ladder as well. Very knowledgeable of the game too. And I'm super, super excited to see. I'm honestly very excited to see that all of Team Czechia has qualified for this tournament. Yep. But let's talk about Bajatak first. In case you guys don't understand my pronunciation whatsoever, Bajatak is...
Number 5.
Number 5. Yeah. I was like, number 5 right there.
I think we can actually group in Bajatak and Thomas together. It might be a disservice to them. But because they are 5th and 6th on the rankings in terms of the seeding, so I think they both went 8-1, which is why they're so high. Yeah. Like you said, they're both from Team Czechia. They're both Czech. They're both very young. I think they're both definitely under 19. I think 18. So one of them might be 17. Might have gotten a birthday already. But still, very young players, very good players. Both on EU Masters with Pakrvac. They got to quarterfinals. And I think lost to Spain, right? In the quarterfinals, Czechia versus Spain. I believe so. So
they did.
It's they couldn't do better. Spain is Spain. It's the best. But
totally not fun.
Getting to quarterfinals was already difficult. They were in the group of death with Germany, I remember. So it was hard to get out of that group D. But yeah, both players that are doing great on ladder right now. They're doing great in the open rounds, of course, going 8-1. Thomas with an aggro strategy even. So even more impressive.
Yeah, you mentioned him earlier. Like he was just playing like a full aggro lineup, and 8-1 with aggro is, like I said, really impressive.
But both players definitely, maybe not favorites because they still like Flaxow, need to have that big tournament win or that really consistent streak of like big placements in a row to get people to really notice their name and say, oh, these guys are as good as, Elix, Pakrvac, Fresh Lobster, Gamebreaker, but they're on the edge. They're all players that have shown up before and that really, I think, have the skill set to be, almost a favorite in this tournament.
Yeah, really excited for both of them. Though I do gotta admit, I have been more knowledgeable of Bajatak Probably because I follow him on Twitter. We got
bias there.
Professional caster. Then we got Trish Fangirl 69. Screw Jennifer, as we have this guy at number 26 representing Norway, as we see right there. Trish Fangirl 69 is a name that has popped up quite a bit. Was one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but Trish Fangirl did qualify to the last season, correct? And they made it quite high up.
I believe so. He was also an EU Masters on Team Norway in that group of death that Norway did pretty bad, but I mean, he was still there with Marcus, of course, in that Norwegian team. He's also the player that brought Braun Vlad.
Nice.
He made it with kind of a riskier lineup.
I like him already.
Tier 1, and he has one of the coolest names in the competitive scene, I think. Trish Fangirl 69. So
we're 12.
Someone to watch out for. He has a good win rate on ladder this season as well. And he's pretty high on ladder right now as we speak. So definitely a player that has shown up before for big tournaments. Like you said, the last seasonal EU Masters, he's been at a few Giant Slayer Fight Night tournaments as well and done pretty good. So someone that, like I said, he needs to have that big showing to put him on that favorite list because he's missing that. But he's always been around the top spots in tournaments and been maybe not the most consistent, but pretty damn consistent.
Yeah. And next we got Frey Bach. I know this guy because I know him as Oikawa because he has an Oikawa avatar from Haikyuu. And I also know that he powerlifts as well. He's Spanish, and he's made a name for himself in the competitive scene as well recently. But he's done very well. Like I've seen his name pop up more and more. We see him number 10 right there, going by the name of Frey in the graphics, from the best country in the world in Spain. Course, and yeah, we have a very strong player here that has been becoming more and more prevalent in the scene. I don't know as much about him because of how recent he is compared to others, but he's been doing great, and I'm really excited to see him, especially like qualified so high up. That must mean he went with like an 8-1, right? Or
I believe it might be 8-1 or just, I think he had a very high ladder placement as well because one of the reasons I included him here is kind of the recency bias of at the start of this season, Riot Spain had a ladder challenge for all Spanish streamers and competitive players called the Mastermind Ladder Series.
Yes.
Which is basically like 1 week or 10 days, whatever it was at the start of the season where players would go from Iron with fresh new accounts with all cards with kind of Riot gifted accounts and try and get the highest score possible. And Frey got, number 1 in Europe. He got the number 1 in Masters ranked ladder, and he finished that competition as the winner, let's say. And he's also just had good tournament results. He had good seasonal results in the open rounds. So I think that's the reason. And we have to include a Spanish player somewhere near the favorites, right? So he's the player I picked. And you mentioned about the powerlifting. I actually did a few interviews with these players. You'll see him tomorrow in the breaks of the broadcast. But if he would win the tournament, he's actually going to try and start saving or start investing into opening a gym. So actually on point with
awesome.
your powerlifting comment.
That's awesome. I can't wait for that interview. Those are the contenders. Again, players that we expect to perform really well, but players who have not perhaps made as big of a name for themselves as the favorites. Now we're going to talk about the dark horses. The players that nobody is expecting much out of, but could potentially shut us all up. I'm adding a little bit of dramatic intensity to it. As
usual.
Let's start off with Spikes. Spikes represented the UK team in the European Masters. He's number 29 right there from the United Kingdom. And yeah, talk a little bit about Spikes because I honestly don't know as much about him. I know who he is, but I'm not as...
He's in the dark horse. I mean, he is a known player, let's say, which is, a lot of people know him from EU Masters, from just the community. He's kind of involved, but he hasn't really had, and UK in general, I think, haven't really had great showings in EU Masters. They didn't make out of groups.
Yeah.
And a lot of Giants players. We had Turtle win one of them, but overall, a lot of UK players haven't done great. So that's why I think it's hard to include him in the contenders, even though he is a good player. And I think he definitely, if he brings his A game, he has a chance to really make just a long run in the tournament tomorrow. But overall, my impression of UK, not just Spikes, but in general, their players, that they haven't really been able to perform at the highest level and really, win a tournament or get really far. But hopefully, Spikes proves me wrong in this regard. The rest of the players on this list that we're going to mention are, neither of us know them very well, but they have a lot of data backing them up.
Exactly. We're going to mention more the data and more than our own personal bias, which is pretty strong at times. It's important to know because some of these players have very impressive win rates amongst other things. We're going to start off with, I like to call him binary Binary man or woman? I don't know. I don't know what they are exactly.
101 or 103. It's a cool name.
Yeah, but I don't see
that.
that. I don't see that in the graphic though. Like, who is this person in the graphic?
The first one, 101 or 103.
Oh,
number one.
Canarchus?
What graphic are you looking at, Mogwai?
The qualified players for
the number one seed is the number 101 or 103. Are you looking at the different?
No, I have like open the qualified players graphics. You see number one Canarchus.
All right, give me a second. I think we might have I have the older version of it, but yes, that's probably him. I'm pretty sure that's him.
Yeah.
It's a Lithuanian flag, no? Yellow.
Yeah, exactly. Lithuanian.
Okay. We're talking about the same guy. It's just the right ID versus his actual in-game name, possibly.
Okay, yeah. So let's go binary. Yeah. So
okay.
Binary is the number one. He went 9-0. 9-0, ladies and gentlemen, in the seasonal qualifier.
He might have gone 8-1 with the best maybe ladder seeding, but I think it's a 9-0 actually. I think he's maybe the only player that went 9-0. I'm not entirely sure though.
I'm gonna go 9-0. It's more dramatic. Undefeated.
It does sell better.
Invincible.
And
101, 101, 03 is but that's pretty much all I know about him. So help me out here.
That's really all I know. As well. He has a good win rate on ladder, a decent win rate. But the biggest thing is that obviously, I mean, he just went through a tournament getting the number one seed. Then he has to kind of be at least, a dark horse in this tournament because you don't do that by luck. It's 9 rounds in a row to be the best player in Europe in that open rounds tournament. It's going to be a similar format, which is just with less rounds in this actual top 32 cut. So he must be very familiar with the current meta, and he must have had a lineup that I believe he just ran the triple tier 1 lineup. So he just ran Nasus, Thresh, Lissandra Trundle, and Lee Sin, I believe. But definitely have to include him as a player that right now might be in this specific season in meta, one of the best players in the game right now in Europe.
Yeah, it's certainly not easy to go 9-0, especially when the more wins you rack up, you go up against some of the best players with the best records as well. So it gets tougher and tougher. And 101 here managed to just plow through the competition. As we're gonna talk about Teddy now, who is representing Germany, number 23, right below Fresh Upster right there in the list. And Teddy has, if I remember correctly, a pretty ridiculous win rate in ladder as well, right?
Yeah, I believe Teddy's win rate was 63%. Same with the Gigas.
Oh my God,
I believe
he
actually has his biggest. He's almost 64% win rate. So
that's crazy.
The best win rate on ladder out of all these players. Of course, some players might play meme decks, might not take it as seriously during some points of the ladder. But still, it's something that's important to mention because some players have 50% win rate. So a 14% difference is massive. Yeah. And he's also currently number 2 on the EU ladder. So in terms of recency, he's also maybe not in that open rounds tournament, which can be you just have a bad matchup and lose a game. But in ladder right now, he's one of the best players, so we had to have him as a possible contender or dark horse for this tournament.
And then we have Jarito, I believe is how you pronounce it. J4Rito, the number 17 there, representing Russia. And I'm going to go Jarito. Jarito is Jarito. I don't know.
The reason these players are dark horse players is because we don't really know much about them, but the data says that we have to keep an eye on them because they're very good on ladder.
What does the data say? What does the data say?
61% win rate on the ladder this past season. Currently in the top 20, and it's a name that I know very well from ladder. I've seen this guy's name a lot on ladder. He's someone that plays a lot and really has been around for a long time in top of the ladder. And he has a cool name. All these lead speak names, Jarito and Gamebreaker, watch out for them because they must know something to have their name like that. They tend to be pretty damn good.
And then Shucky, number 3 right there. I feel I'm Belgium, right? Like just
I believe so. I just want
to make sure I don't mess this up, man.
I think it might be Belgium. Let's go. I think it is. This time, actually, Marla, you're kind of right.
Yeah, oh thank God.
I was expecting I don't know.
I know geography, okay? There's just a lot of countries in Europe.
Or like an African country all of a sudden. Yeah, Belgium, I think is correct.
Okay, so what does the data say about Shucky?
Shucky is a 58% win rate player, so not the best, but I know him. I wanted to include him because I know him personally from facing him so many times.
Okay.
Not personally, but in the game at least.
Yeah.
He's a maybe the best discard aggro player of all time. He's someone that almost every time I placed him, he's playing this deck. I once, for some reason, queued into him 3 times in a row, on Masters Ladder, and he was playing discard aggro and he beat me every time. I'm like, fuck this guy. But very good player, third in the seeding, so he went 8-1.
Yeah.
I believe he was playing discard aggro, and he's a very aggressive player. Some players, I think, maybe Raxito, the Spanish player, is facing him in round 1, I believe, from the provisional bracket. Some people.
Ooh, I'm excited.
And the difficult thing is that you have to kind of think, I'm facing a perennial aggro player in round 1. Do I prepare my lineup to beat this guy and go past that, or do I just prepare it for the field? Because that's the annoying thing about these aggro players. You have to kind of tech for them. So it's a difficult position, and I personally think he's one of the better aggro players, or one of the best aggro players, I think, in Europe. And we'll see if he brings discard aggro. If he does, get ready to see maybe some of the best discard aggro play you've ever seen if we do get to cast this game.
Yeah, I'm actually excited for that because I'm not the biggest aggro fan, but I do love Draven Jinx because it's a highly synergistic sort of aggro deck that, believe it or not, does require brain cells to pilot, and you definitely see some of like when a really good player is behind it, it's very pretty to watch. Regardless, we're gonna move on to Cosimo Leonardo. This is an addition, that I did like last minute because I've been seeing this name more and more. I follow, from Twitter, I tend to follow like a lot of the Spanish tournaments, and this is a name that always seems to be at the top, man. Like this is a name that just wins the majority of Spanish tournaments that I see or that I know of, and he's just more and more prevalent. And now we see him as number 9, qualified here, right above Frey Bach here. So really, really excited to see Cosimo in action because the little that I have seen about him is very impressive. He seems to be very consistent and just a phenomenal player all around.
I think he's more recent, but he's on the up and up. I think he's really starting to become maybe one of the better tournament and lineup players from Spain. And I think he still doesn't have the staying power. His name isn't as known as, EU Master players that were in that team or, some of the more popular Spanish players. But I think he's on an upward trajectory. And this seasonal might be his breakout moment where he gets, a top 8 or a top 4 maybe. Maybe he makes the final like Sergio Tuvamos did, and we have a Spanish player there as well for this seasonal. But definitely someone that I think we have to mention here as a dark horse. Doesn't have the huge tournament win, not have maybe the Spanish tournaments to really back up his name yet. But I think he's going to maybe get there soon.
I think this guy's going to do well. I predict this guy's going to make it at least 2 rounds in. Like maybe I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but I really think something tells me this guy's going to do well. And yeah, some quick mentions to other Spanish players because we're not biased at all. We got M. Cabezabolo, who's been playing for a long time. He's a veteran of the game, and it's nice to see him qualify over here. And we got Raxitos, who was a part of the Spanish European Masters team as well, making it, I believe he made it with a 7-2 record, right? Placing at number 30 right there. Very strong deep player. I think if we're expecting any deep, we may see it from Raxitos. He's a very big advocate of the archetype. And it's always nice when you see players like I like it. It brings me it makes me think about like card game animes. People with their own play style and they play their own deck even though nobody else plays that. That's a very weird analogy / comment, but I'm gonna go with it.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does. Right?
I think if you allow me the last 2 honorable mentions I want to make as well.
Yeah, for sure.
In our top 16 list, but it would be Past and Shame. He's a French player, and he actually qualified playing a full control lineup, and one of his decks was Karma, Kindred, Elise with Gohard. I'm pretty sure. So this guy's someone that took a big risk, did something completely off meta. And from what I interviewed him, and he told me he's a huge control player, and he might bring something either the same or very similar to this tournament.
That's exciting.
So, someone to watch out for. Second player is Ragnar Rosic, Russian player. Yeah, maybe 24. Not as known as Jarito, but I think those 2 Russian players are gonna. And we always have some Russian players. We saw Petish win it last tournament. So these people that we don't know so much because they're in the CIS region, they kind of stick to their own CIS region, but we don't know in the Western Europe. There's not that much interaction, but there's always going to be that 1 or 2 sleeper Russian players that make it very far. And I think it's either going to be Jarito or Ragnar Rosic. Man,
this tournament is going to be super exciting. Like I just love the fact that there's so many names we recognize here. That's something that I was worried about. Because when it comes to competitive card games, you really need to figure out the right format to compensate the more consistent players. And I feel like they nailed it with this, man. We got an amazing lineup. 32 players are going to be going at it tomorrow, and we are going to be casting that from, I believe, I think it's 1 p.m. CST, but I'll confirm everything in the description by this point. So if you want to know all the details, just go to the description down below. The link to the Twitch stream will be there as well. And hopefully Panda and I see you there tomorrow as we're going to be casting the entire thing. and we're really looking forward to it. Any last things to say?
Not much else. Happy to be back on your channel. Like I said, hopefully the next time it'll be with Progress Day coming back.
I'm working on it.
maybe like a Halloween special, like Progress Day resurrects, like a zombie kind of theme. We can all dress up maybe. Although October is pretty far away, but that's the more realistic thing, I think.
Oh, Jesus, come on, man. That's some faith. That's some faith.
It's the truth. What do you want me to say?
All right, well, fuck you too, buddy. All right, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, and we'll be back at it tomorrow with a video. And if you want to check out the tournament, which I implore that you do, link down below. So hopefully I'll see you there. Have a solid day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.